Connor O'Gara joining us, national columnist Saturday Down South, and a good friend of our show every Monday. Connor, I apologize. I feel sorry for you, man. You had a practically a family member that was an offensive coordinator in the SEC. We'd had so much fun with this Liam Coen doppelganger thing, but it's done. He's already gone. 1 year, one and done, and now we've got to find someone else who looks like you, and I guess Mark Stoops has to find a new offensive coordinator, too.
I've got a few family members that he can call. My brother was, I think, not exactly built for that role as a Power 5 offensive coordinator, but he does already live in Lexington, so we can make that happen. My sister-in-law actually joked. She's like, there's only room for one O'Gara in Lexington. That's why Liam had to go. So I kind of get it, but at the same time, I am a little bit bummed because it was fun, and getting to spend a little bit of time with him up there. It was kind of cool. It was trippy walking into the room and looking at a guy who looks like he could easily be the third brother in our family, which was just bizarre. But I think it's just such a tremendous hire for Sean McVay, obviously, and something that could have real implications in the SEC East. I think is worth dissecting, and something that I think fan bases outside of Lexington will be paying attention to.
Well, things opened up for them offensively a little bit under Liam Coen. By the way, you ought to see if you can just sneak into their facilities, just walk right into the Rams facilities and just get a look at that Super Bowl trophy. You want to talk about like an incredible increase in the pressure and maybe the money too, going from OC at Kentucky to offensive coordinator for now defending Super Bowl champions.
Pretty big jump.
This is a step up in every possible way, and man, pressure's at the top of that list.
Yeah, the only difference being that he's not calling plays with the Rams. I mean, that's Sean McVay's deal, and he's going to have a different set of responsibilities. And I had people ask the question, what does an offensive coordinator do if they're not calling plays? And I think he'll have a big part on, big picture things. And I think he'll do a lot with their receivers and their quarterbacks. He was the assistant coach in their receiver room, worked a lot with Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods, and worked a lot with their quarterbacks as well. So, I think he's just going to be a guy who's going to have this fast track to getting an NFL head coaching gig. I mean, he's had 4 offensive coordinators, Sean McVay has, none of whom have called plays, who now have NFL head coaching gigs. I mean, that is like as coveted of a job as there is at the assistant level in the NFL. And yeah, it's a bummer for Kentucky, but at the same time, Kentucky fans knew. I mean, they very well knew. And I truly think that unless he was getting an NFL offensive coordinator job, that he wouldn't have left. I heard that there was the Miami interest, Mario Cristobal. That job ultimately goes to Josh Gaddis. But Kentucky could have kept him had it not been for the Rams, the place that he just came from.
Mm-hmm. And staying with Kentucky here for a second, and in the SEC East, Connor, I was reading your story that you put out a few days ago about South Carolina and Tennessee kind of looking to make a year 2 jump the way that Ole Miss and Arkansas did under Lane Kiffin and Sam Pittman. But with Kentucky, if Tennessee and South Carolina are somehow able to make that type of jump of getting around 9 wins this season, where does that leave Mark Stoops and Kentucky? Because I think in the last few years, you could almost pencil them in at that 3rd spot in the East. Do they now go back to their normal spot at somewhere around 6 or 7 if Tennessee and South Carolina are able to make those big jumps?
I'll say this. I would have had no problem whatsoever saying Kentucky number 2 team in the East again this year had Liam Coen come back. I think that the gap between 2 and 5 in the East this year is just so few and far between. And it kind of was in the SEC West this past year. I mean, you could really make the case. The parity was all over the place. It felt like each and every week we're asking the question, who's the second best team in the West? And even for a little bit with Alabama after it loses to A&M, we're like, what is the SEC West right now? It's all over the place. But I think the East is kind of going to be like that, and I would have been more of the belief that Kentucky had a legitimate chance to finish second in the East. And maybe they still will. There's still a possibility of that. I think Tennessee has the best chance to finish second now in the East with Hendon Hooker returning, with what Josh Heupel did in year 1, having a top 10 offense. But yeah, 2 through 5, man, it's it's really interesting. I think what this ends up being is Kentucky will be bunched in this group with South Carolina, of course, with a team like Florida, who, oh, by the way, has a year one coach themselves, and then with Tennessee, we're going to see a lot of 7-5, 8-4. I think we see a lot of teams that are maybe 4-4 in the league, and that's just going to be, every single week it's going to look like, oh, this team's better than this team's better than this team. But Kentucky is definitely in that group, and the chance that they had of potentially having a run, I think, to Atlanta. I think with Liam Coen gone now, I think you would look at that and say that seems like slim to none at this point.
And with the improvement that we are hoping to have in the East of, with a Beamer and then Heupel, and then depending on what happens with Billy Napier in year one at Florida, how many years, or is it this year? Is it the year after that we start to look at the West and East as almost equals? Because it's been a long time since you've looked at the East as saying that they're on par with the West.
It's that exact point right there. If Heupel and Beamer take that next step this year, and they have the years that we saw from Pittman and Kiffin, where both of those programs did things that they hadn't done in the playoff era. And I think if we see that step this year from those two programs, then we can kind of start to have that conversation. As of right now, it's still Georgia and everybody else. I mean, we can't sit here and pretend like anybody is going to be on that level. When we get to SEC Media Days, if you're picking somebody who isn't Georgia to win the division, you're just doing so to be a contrarian. And I kind of floated this idea out there last year. I was like, when's the next time that somebody not named Florida or Georgia is going to win the division? I mean, you got to go back to 2014. Year one of the playoff era. That's the last time that's happened. And the West has at least had an LSU 2019. LSU wins a national championship, of course. We've seen these seasons from an Ole Miss or an Arkansas where you're like, all right, they're legit. They would easily be second best in the East at this point. But yeah, I think it's still going to be a bit of time. We need to see those jumps from Heupel and Beamer, I think, this season.
Connor was at a basketball game yesterday, and I need your review of the Florida students rushing the court because they kind of looked like they were a little bit unsure of what they wanted to do, and what you might have seen from Razorback fans storming the court. I would say Arkansas's court rush was quite a bit more exciting.
Oh gosh, not even close. Not even close. I mean, I was kind of bracing for it, and I was like, oh, maybe we're going to see kind of at that level. And I talked to Melissa Lang about it. And she's like, I've never seen a court fill up as quickly as it did on that night when Arkansas took down Auburn. And watching Florida fans kind of have that awkward should we, shouldn't we, while the PA guy is just trying to discourage it the entire time. It was so awkward. And some of them, rushed the floor, and you could tell like it wasn't this, this mass thing. And then they quickly kind of exited. I don't know if they're going to have to pay the fee. I haven't kept up on Twitter to see if they're going to have to pay the fine, the one that Arkansas did. Arkansas got its money's worth.
Yeah,
if Florida had to pay that fee, they would look back on that and be like, oh, that really wasn't worth it. That wasn't as good. And not to take away from the atmosphere, because it was a great atmosphere. It was an awesome game. I was glad I was able to be there. Shout out to my buddy Drew, who had the hook up there behind Auburn's bench. But, yeah, it looked way different. I mean, it just did, and you can kind of tell. And maybe part of that is Arkansas's fault for beating Auburn and probably taking the wind out of Florida's sail a little bit and making that upset not feel quite as unique. But, yeah, they definitely did not rush the floor in the same way that Arkansas fans did.
Yeah, Connor, this is probably going to be a weekly question for you, and I'm sure I won't be the only person that show that you join that will ask you this, especially with the ideas of pod systems thrown out, gaining some traction again last week, the potential schedule of Texas OU in the SEC. What's the latest on that? Is it going to happen this year, or are we going to wait till the contract's up with the Big 12? I mean, I just feel like there has to be some bomb of them not waiting, coming in this year in the next few months. Like it just feels like it's going to happen.
Yeah, now I'm actually not of the impression that it's going to happen this year. I'm just not. I think it actually benefits the SEC more to wait. It was different when we thought, hey, 12-team playoff, they're going to ramp up the contract and they're going to start this thing over and we're going to be in a different place. But now if you're the SEC, if you're Greg Sankey, you're kind of like, hey, well, you know what? We're not necessarily in any hurry to add Texas and Oklahoma when there is the 4-team playoff because then of course you run the risk of watering down, or saturating your field and kind of doing what the Big Ten has done at times, and kind of beating up on each other, and you don't maybe have that elite team emerge. There's a risk in that in the 4-team system. So I think we see that we are going to have to wait a few more years to see it happen. We're going to see Bob Bowlesby get up to the Big 12 championship stage and have to awkwardly hand over these conference championship trophies to Oklahoma, and it's going to be this thing that we look forward to every single year. But I think we're a few years off from that now that the playoff system, we're not going to see the field expanded to 12 until 2026.
Well, and it just feels like they can't get out of their own way. Like, I haven't paid as much attention to these negotiations and which conference doesn't want what, because I've been knee-deep in basketball and now with baseball too. But it's just like, I saw you tweeted about this. Is this really all about automatic qualifiers? Because it seems like if that's the case, that's a tacit understanding by those leagues that there's a very good chance that they won't have a team that is in the top 12 anyway for a committee's rankings. So it's a backwards way to get into what would be an expanded playoff. Is that the way I'm reading it? Am I reading it properly?
Yeah, it's lame. It's almost like they're trying to defend against bias, but it's like, look, you can look back at the rankings at each given year, and I think the Pac-12 would have missed out once because of this. It's like, that's what you're going to get. That's what you're going to get caught up in. Like, I just don't necessarily understand it. And to sit here and pretend like every single conference should have the same exact thing at stake and having these automatic qualifiers is lunacy. And that's why I hated the 8-team playoff idea, because it's like you're going to have 6 of 8 as automatic qualifiers. We have 15 years worth of data to show us that not all conferences are created equal. Why in the world would the SEC ever agree to that? It makes no sense whatsoever. And the Big Ten is acting like there's some sort of bias here. What's bias, man? What are we doing here if we're pretending that the Big Ten who has just had one team play for a national championship in the 21st century? What are we doing if we're pretending like winning the Big Ten is the same thing as winning the SEC? It's just not. And you can sit here and defend bias all you want, but automatic qualifiers should not be the holdup. That to me just makes no sense whatsoever. And these conferences are going to hurt themselves by not cashing in on a bigger check to be able to get from the college football playoff media rights deal.
See, and that's the thing about this. It just feels like nobody's winning in any of this. And keeping the 4-team playoff format, yeah, it was good to start there. But we have enough years, we have enough data to show that we need more excitement. We need more team. I mean, who's really losing by them staying 4? I mean, is it the schools themselves by not getting that extra money? But I think us as fans and us as people that follow it are the real losers in all of this, because we have to now sit through so many more just terrible semifinal games.
Yeah, and the Pac-12 is, in my opinion, the biggest loser of all of this, which what else is new? I mean, the Pac-12 not getting to the playoff, another year has happened. That's like saying the sky is blue, all right? Like, what are we going to need to see for the Pac-12 to finally break through? Maybe it's Lincoln Riley doing what he's doing at USC. Maybe Oregon with Dan Lanning, the Georgia defensive coordinator who took over there, is going to be able to kind of get them to new heights. But man, the Pac-12 could realistically have an 8-9 year stretch here without a playoff team, and all because they decided, oh yes, we need to have this alliance, we need to have this agreement, 4-team playoff. We're going to stick with it. When it's like, well, you could have been helping yourself in a different sort of way and giving your programs a different way to get national exposure. Instead, you decided to die on this hill. But yeah, it does feel like the fans are losing, and the Pac-12 is losing more than any of the other Power 5 conferences.
Connor, we'll leave it there. Appreciate you. Thanks as always. Let's have a good week.
Football might be over this season, but basketball is in full steam for both pros and college hoops. For all the latest odds, totals, player performance props, to where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline is the #1 spot for all your sports betting needs. Head over to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Use our promo code BELIEVE to get started. That's promo code BLEAV. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds, right to the Olympic coverage, is the best in the business. From sports right down to your favorite Vegas casino games, BetOnline is your #1 online wagering destination. BetOnline, the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports and play your favorite games. Bet online, where the game starts.